The Cannoneer deals way more damage, but attacks slower and takes more health. The interactions are wildly different. If you split wall breakers, the Cannoneer completely counters it. Even if you don't split the wall breakers, Cannoneer completely counters it. This is because it has a slightly faster first attack speed, so the Firecracker won't even hit the Cannoneer tower. That does mean that you're not going to be able to activate the King tower with a Firecracker by yourself anymore, is what I would originally say, but it is possible to activate a Firecracker. You just have to do it a little bit earlier and a little bit higher up. So a Furnace is going to be completely useless against the Cannoneer. The Fire Spirit's never going to connect just because it dies in one shot. Dark Goblin's is going to get a little bit less damage just because it only gets one hit. Phoenix only gets one hit on the tower with the Cannoneer just because it's so much stronger. Even slightly tankier things like a Fisherman, it's going to get a few less hits. This is almost in the Fireball territory where things that nearly die to Fireball are going to just die really fast. Huge difference for things like a Little Prince. These are just one-on-one interactions, but we'll do a little more complex ones later on. For Skeleton Dragons, it's going to die in 2 hits. Does kill the Skeleton Dragon a little bit faster. For an Inferno Dragon, it's still going to be a lot of damage because it has that sliver of health. Medium-sized units that are Fireball-y like an Ice Wizard, it's only going to get 1 hit. Compared to Princess Tower, she's struggling. It's going to be the exact same interaction with the Mother Witch, just because it just dies instantly. The Mother Witch does get 1 extra hit, though. Musketeer only gets 2 shots. It's almost as if you can ignore these units if you don't have anything fast. Electro Wizard's still going to get 2 hits on the tower, but the Princess Tower, that one you don't want to ignore. 4 hits. A surprising interaction, you can completely ignore a Hunter. Just because the Magic Archer is such a fast attacking unit, once it locks on the tower, it's still going to get a few shots. Decks with Baby Dragon, like a Graveyard, it just melts in 3 shots. So it doesn't even tank for the Graveyard that long. But it is really weak against a naked Graveyard. We'll talk more on that later in the video. With the Cannoneer, it's a completely different way to play Clash Royale. It's like you want fast cycle decks like Skeletons, Electro Spirit, just so that it can deal with the things a little bit quicker. Obviously, you can't leave a cannon cart by itself. It's going to be devastating to both towers. The Executioner is still going to get a lot of hits on the tower. The Cannoneer just can't take out these mini tanks by itself. You need a little Ice Spirit. Obviously, these are one-on-one interactions. This is just more to give you a gut feeling of what the Cannoneer can and can't do. Notice how it just shoots the balloon a little bit faster. And just because it's going to have a little more damage, it's not going to be completely devastating to the Princess Tower, or at least in this case, to the Cannon Tower. Especially if you have something like a Snowball to completely stop it. It's going to be a completely different interaction. Doesn't even connect to the Cannoneer Tower. Even with the Snowball, the Princess Tower still got hit twice. For things like a Ram Rider or even a Hog Rider, they're still going to connect, but it's going to deal a lot less damage just because they're going to die a little bit quicker. With the nature of the Hog Rider, it does get a little less hits, and it is a lot easier to defend if you have something like a cannon. Hog Rider is going to get 2 extra hits on the Princess Tower. Just like with any other Hog Rider deck, Buildings are going to do an amazing job against it. But if you notice with that Hog Rider, it lived with a sliver of health. I really think fast units like Dark Goblin or even small DPS units like Bats and Skeletons are going to make a huge difference. So if we have Skeletons in this combo, the Cannoneer just takes it out a little bit faster just because it didn't have that sliver of health. I really think the Ice Golem is going to be an amazing synergy for this. Just because it can kite the units into the middle where both Cannoneers are attacking it, nothing connects. Same thing with the Valkyrie. That small Ice Spirit pulls the Valkyrie and she only gets 2 hits compared to the Princess Tower, just gets devastated, loses 1,000 health versus the 600. I really think the Ice Golem being able to kite the Cannoneer into both lanes is going to be so valuable. You can't ignore Rascals. The Rascal girls are just going to cause so much damage. And just because the tower attacks slower, it couldn't even kill the Rascal girls, even though it killed the Rascal boy faster. In this case, if it's just the Rascal boy, it's only going to get 1 hit on the tower. So here's a regular interaction with the Mini P.E.K.K.A. It does die a little bit faster, but just like, you never want to ignore a Mini P.E.K.K.A. Something as small as an ice spirit's gonna go a long way. Not only to kite it and slow it down, but it brings it down that sliver of health that it missed in the first interaction. 0 connections. The attack speed is kind of a disadvantage because if it has that sliver of health, it's gonna live. But in this case, against an Electro Giant, because it attacks so much slower, it's gonna hurt itself a little bit less, taking out the Electro Giant. Against the Princess Tower, the Princess is gonna die because she shoots so much faster. But against the Cannoneer, it actually survives an Electro Giant despite having less health. If you put the cannon 1 tile in the other lane, it's gonna pull the Giant a little bit further. Interestingly enough, the second Princess Tower did hit the Electro Giant, but the second Cannoneer didn't. I hope by the time you guys are watching this video that Supercell fixes that and makes the ranges consistent. Things that it kills in exactly 3 shots is great, but if it survives with just a pixel of health, it'll deal way more. It really does force you to play the game a little differently. You don't have to worry about big tanks as much. You can counter them for a little bit cheaper. Leaving things alone aren't completely devastating. Okay, now I'm just curious. What happens with a bowler? That was a perfectly placed skeleton. Cannoneer completely stops it. Bowler still gets a hit on the Princess, though. Small little tanks go a long way. This is how you actually counter a bowler. And just look how much faster that knight walks away with half its health. The Cannoneer's knight ended up surviving with enough health to deal 400 damage to the Princess Tower. I want to know what happens to a bandit. A sliver of health, but the fact the first cannon shot hits it is a pretty big deal. Against a bandit, skeletons alone are going to fully counter it, but with a perfectly placed cannon. Does the Cannoneer from both sides hit it? It doesn't. The Princess does, though. And because the Princess has more range, it ended up being about the same. That 1 pixel of range that the Cannoneer doesn't have, that's ridiculous. I'm going to do the exact same placement, but with Golem. Golem's hitbox is a little bit bigger. So both Cannoneers do hit the Golem. And it pops before reaching the tower for the death damage. Princess Tower is still struggling with the Golemites. 400 damage on the Cannoneer Tower, 800 damage on the Princess Tower. Let's see this exact same placement with just the Elixir Golem. Oh yeah, that's way faster. And because the Elixir Golem spreads out more, the Cannoneer just devastates the Elixir blobs way faster. That's a full counter on the Cannoneer's part. These are wildly inconsistent. Just because the Giants don't have as big of a hitbox as the Golem does. The Cannoneer should be hitting both sides, but it's not. So against a Giant and a Goblin Giant, it's about the same. It does struggle against the Spear Goblins. It's going to deal with the Royal Giant a little better. But left alone, the tower is going to die. It's going to die a little bit faster because it has less health. Let's see a Royal Giant actually defend against this. So the cannon absorbed most of the hits. Royal Giant only gets 2 hits on the Cannoneer Tower, but it is going off on the Princess Tower. Oh, this is where it really shines. Kiting stuff like Ice Golems, just so that the Mega Knight is in range of both towers. It just gets destroyed. Still got 1 jump hit. I feel like I could kite that better. The Princess Tower, though, is struggling. 2,000 damage on the Princess Tower, 600 on the Cannoneer. Just really big tanks like Giant Skeleton aren't even intimidating anymore. It just shreds so much faster. Few seconds faster, and technically that knight lived. So this time, let's put the knight a little bit higher so it walks away from the bomb. World of a difference. Cannoneer's knight lives. Giant Skeleton dies. I mean, because you didn't kite, but still. It's so crazy how you have to kite with the Princess Tower, but for the knight, if you want it to survive, you put it on top for the Cannoneer. It's a completely different playstyle. One of the worst spells for the Cannoneer is probably going to be Zap. If you zap minion hordes, zap lava pups, the outcome's still going to be the same. Even if you zap the pups. The Cannoneer's still not going to be able to take care of them the same way that the Princess Tower can when you zap it. 2,000 damage. You're absolutely going to need arrows. absolute spells like arrows that just kill minion horde, log that kills ground troops. If you have lingering stabbing goblins, Zap's gonna be useless against stab goblins. If you do bring Zap, you're probably gonna need Electro Spirit, and that's a crazy fast cycle deck. You're playing Hog 2.6. There's a Lava Hound coming. You only have a cannon. Cannoneer is gonna shred through that Lava Hound way faster. But when the pups pop, it's gonna struggle real bad. This is its downfall right here. Princess Tower took less health because it could kill the pups faster. It will take care of Sparky a little bit quicker. But is it quick enough to stop it from the second shot? I know the Princess Tower isn't. Ah! 2 shots takes out the tower. So here's a more realistic example. 1 shot gets taken out. But the Princess Tower still suffers that second shot. Let's say you put down something that can attack. 0 shots on the Cannoneer. Let's talk about its weaknesses. Stabby goblins. Even if they were zapped, it's still going to be the same outcome. Minions, surprisingly, can handle them pretty decently. Oh, but when you get into bats territory, this is basically minion horde coming into your tower. Princess, none of the bats connect. On the Cannoneer, 800 damage for 2 elixir. That ain't right. Even though it does more damage, it doesn't one-shot the goblin barrel or the skeleton barrel. So it's still going to connect. An ignored skeleton barrel takes out the Cannoneer completely. It is weaker to bait like swarm troops. The one surprising thing is that it actually defends against goblin barrel slightly better. 7 stabs instead of 8. But in the long run, it actually has less health. So does it really defend it better? Against goblin drill, it's gonna deal more damage to the drill itself, but it's probably gonna struggle with the goblins that spawn from it. Actually, the princess struggled more. Goblin gang for a Princess Tower is gonna deal a lot of damage, but Goblin gang on the Cannoneer, it's gonna be so much more just because those spear goblins take forever to die. Here's a funky one. You cannot ignore a tombstone. It's going to seem like you can in the beginning. It's going to start ramping up, but it's going to start ramping up and the skeletons get closer and closer and closer. And there's the connection. Once that tombstone pops, it's basically a Skarmy on the Cannoneer. 6 skeletons, the Princess Tower can take easily. 7 skeletons, Cannoneer, it's going to die. Even 1 elixir skeletons connect to the Cannoneer. That 1 skeleton's going to get a shot. That's so weird. Evolved 1 elixir skeletons. You literally can't ignore them like you can at Princess Tower. Bridge planted solo skeletons are gonna 3 crown. Swarms are its worst enemy. You need poison, arrows, you need a lot of splash. Here's the thing I really don't like is that it has less health. Fine, give it more damage, but keep the range and the health the same. Against spells, it's a lot weaker. This is the 3rd rocket cycle. Imagine someone just playing defensively the entire time and spelling you out because you have Cannoneer. I think because of this, small things that don't cross the bridge like Rocket, Mortar, Expo are going to be a lot stronger against it. That Princess Tower still needs 3 more rockets. The Cannoneer only needs a zap or something small. So much weaker to spell cycle, and that's wrong to me. Inherently, it's just going to be weaker to Expo and Mortar. These decks never need to cross the bridge. They're not going to deal with that extra damage. It's got less health, so it's going to die even faster. 1 Mortar connection, 1 Expo connection. That's significantly different. Both towers got the same amount of mortar hits, but it's got 400 less health. That's more than a rocket. Witch and Night Witch are just really devastating. The skeletons that tank for the Witch, and then the amount of skeletons that she just spawns. So if you split the piglets, the Princess Tower kind of struggles, but the Cannoneer 2 shots the piglets. That's a massive interaction. It's 1600 damage total on the Princess Towers, 800 damage on the Cannoneers. It's almost more deadly if you don't split them, but that goes to the Princess Tower as well. In this case, the Princess Tower can't even defend it. That's a tower loss. If you play Graveyard, you know you're gonna have to put a tank in front of it. But the Cannoneer attacks so much slower that the skeletons actually ramp up and it will die completely to a naked Graveyard. You probably even want to activate the King Tower whenever you can. If you split Skarmy, The Princess Tower is going to have no issues dealing with a split Skarmy. But against the Cannoneer, it's hilariously devastating to both sides. You take out the right side and the left side goes down 2,000 health. Barbarian Barrel's going to get one hit on the Princess Tower, but it's not going to connect against the Cannoneer. Overall, it's a pretty solid card. There's going to be some small interaction changes that you're going to need to be mindful of. The Cannoneer is going to 3-shot the Mini P.E.K.K.A now, and it's only going to get 1 shot compared to 3 shots on the Princess Tower. With the Skeleton King, it's almost like you want to activate the ability first, just so that the skeletons tank for the Skeleton King itself. The Cannoneer troop is so specific. It makes you play the game in a different way. Instead of Ice Spirit, I'm going to put Electro Spirit. Instead of Fireball, I'm going to put Poison. Are they going to use the... Is that the ability or no? I feel like I'm in total control. They just made Hog Cycle stronger. Am I scared? Or are they scared? Come on, Skellies, don't die on me. Nice. Imagine Evolution Skeletons countering everything. Hog Rider in the pocket. Oh yeah, we can vibe with that. Musketeer is still alive. Might have overcommitted with the Hog Rider, that's fine. Not the best example because I'm not an ultimate champion, but I really think Hog Cycle or any other type of cycle is going to go so good with the Cannoneer. It's more rock, paper, scissors than ever.